Greetings, Imagination Connoisseurs. It is once again I, the sanctimoniously notorious RMB, here for this, taking you back in time for Robservations live chat number 146. You're probably asking yourselves, oh, wait a minute, Rob, wasn't yesterday Robservations live chat 149? Indeed it was. But apparently I forgot or skipped or misnumbered or did something that caused me to forget episode 146. So I'm taking you back in time to the weekend. I guess it would have been Sunday. We're back on Sunday. So if you could buy a lottery number, well, I don't buy one because we're not really back in time, but it'd be fun to pretend we're back in time, at least for a day. So this is Robservations episode 146. My God, we're time traveling. We're doing it together. I'm doing it with you, the members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community, you Imagination Connoisseurs. And since you are Imagination Connoisseurs, I know that you can all imagine that we have traveled back in time. You know, you could even, if you wanted to, do that like Mike Bond brought out, the Bill and Ted thing, you know, whatever. That was a terrible version of it, but you know what I mean. We're all back in time. We've all gone back in time together. And we're here. And this would be Robservations number 146, brought to you by Lucky Tiger Men's Grooming Products for those men who want to look good and feel great. And as many of you know who have been here before, if you go to their website at getluckytiger.com and you buy their products, when you check out, if you punch in PGS for this, the Post-Geek Singularity community, you get 20% off of your order. How cool is that? And, you know, I think they just wrapped up their summer sweepstakes. I don't know if it's still going on. I think it's over now, but you can still go to clubluckytiger.com and see what's up there because it's awesome. A lot going on. It tells me, I've been told right before this began that the embargo for the reviews from Spider-Man Far From Home are dropping now. So please continue to watch this show and before you go read those reviews. But if you must leave, remember to like this chat and perhaps subscribe if you haven't already. Now, I got a few letters. It's very interesting that I get disparate letters sometimes covering the same subjects at the same time. I always find that great. And one of the things that we've talked about many times on the show is what happens when you have a significant other that perhaps is not the kind of imagination connoisseur that you are. What do you do? What do you decide, like, when you go to a movie, who picks it? What about the radio? Who plays the songs? Or do you have one of those significant others that when they don't hear the song they want, they just keep switching the dial until the right song comes on? There's nothing more that I hate than that. But anyway, that's why, you know, having Sirius XM or Pandora or whatever, it's great because you can truly design your own playlists because mixtapes and mixed CDs are truly a thing of the past. You can just email somebody your playlist. It's not romantic. You don't even have to put enough effort into it anymore. It's kind of sad. But anyway, I was just thinking about that mostly because I'm getting letters. And this first letter, comes all the way from Australia. And it comes from Mr. Aaron Brown. Hey, Rob. Thank you for taking the arduous task of reading my first letter to you on the show. It was a surreal experience to have my written voice conveyed so eloquently over the interwebs and experience the response within the Post-Geek Singularity. You've again sparked my response with your question about what do we do, the members of the Post-Geek Singularity, sharing with our partners in terms of fandom and how does this enrich our relationships? I have been married to my wife, Shasta, for just over 2 years now, with us being together for a shade over 3 years. I love that your significant other her name is Shasta. I think that's fantastic. Like yourself and your partner, Elizabeth, we came across each other through online dating and hit it off pretty quickly, finding we had much of the same outlook on life and we knew what we wanted. I must admit that I'm easily the bigger geek, or what have you, of the two of us. But for the most part, she joins me in enjoying most of my viewing interests and brings her own unique perspective to them. My wife enjoys assessing films, television, and what have you through the lens of social and psychological critique. For her, this is most definitely her wheelhouse, as she currently holds 7 university degrees, including a psychology degree, a law degree, degrees relating to teaching, where she can teach English, modern history, and legal studies, and is qualified to be a school counselor or psychologist in her own right. So you've married a real underachiever. Funnily enough, she doesn't professionally operate in many of these fields currently because she works in the welfare field for our government. Her experience and passion for these social aspects give her a much different perspective on the media we take in than I have. I'm probably best considered a creative, as unlike my wife, I only have a couple of university degrees, operating professionally off my degree in graphic design. I've always been creatively inclined, whether it be my passion for illustration and painting, forming my great love of comics, or my love of music, leading me to perform in bands for the past 15 years or more, in clubs and on the road. One of the things I enjoy most about our relationship, however, to get back to the topic, is our ability to discuss plots, characterization, or what have you from completely different standpoints. Indeed, she isn't invested in the likes of Marvel or DC characters when they get put into a film, and couldn't possibly have the same outlook or expectations as me going into a movie, having read the comics or the novel, or just being steeped in the mythos of whatever it is we're taking in. But I'm always eager to hear her take on it all once we've watched something, because she undoubtedly has some gem that has never even crossed my mind about the story or its impact or what have you. As an interesting case in point, when we recently watched X-Men Dark Phoenix at the cinema, Shasta likely had no preconceived expectations on the film. I wasn't expecting a great deal, as like many of us, I had been privy to the news and rumors and reviews of the film. I didn't hate it, as it turns out. I wasn't impressed either, mind you, but it wasn't the train wreck I was expecting, even if it did have a rehashed train sequence. Shasta, however, noted chiefly that the creators of the film must not have consulted anyone in the psychology field about how Jean's conflict and emotion should be portrayed in the writing of the character and script. For her, all verisimilitude was stripped away from the character, not being believable in their motives in relation to having experienced great trauma, especially at a young age. She noted it was highly unlikely that the character of Jean would flip between having impulses of great rage at one moment and a sense of serenity within seconds of these same outbursts, even with an alien entity in her. She felt this was portrayed poorly. For me, multitudes of problems with the age of the characters and the appearance of the cast, the noting villains and other aggravating elements of the film made it a poor movie, but our takes were completely different. It is truly one of the great things I appreciate about our dynamic, and I'm very lucky that she's quite easygoing and open to embracing most of the things I'm looking forward to seeing, with a few exceptions. She doesn't share my enthusiasm or love for some of my favorite films, such as The Big Lebowski, American Psycho, or Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Nor do we share love of the same sort of music generally. I'm very much into classic rock, metal, and many of its multitude subgenres, whereas she jams to R&B. We often take turns to who controls the car stereo on long drives. As I'm sure the story with most of the imagination connoisseurs here and their significant others that they may have, it's our differences and idiosyncrasies that make it all interesting. I personally have never met anyone who I agree with on a majority of topics, and as I get older, I'm not sure I want to, as I do love a great debate or heated discussion. Once again, Rob, you have provided an exhilarating outlet, allowing myself and others to express their story and enrich each other's lives in doing so, much like the line you close with each show. I must thank you for the prompt and the opportunity to do so. Whilst I remember it, I've been meaning to ask. I've heard you mention being a big fan of In Excess previously. They were a great Australian band. As an Aussie myself, I wanted to know if you were a fan of any other Australian bands or artists, or indeed Australian films, and if so, which ones? I look forward to hearing yours and the other members of the Post-Geek Singularity's responses. Well, first of all, Aaron, your letter and one other inspired the topic of this conversation, which is, how do you deal with a significant other that might not be as steeped in geek culture or being an imagination connoisseur as you are? How does that work? Can it work? But before I get to that, I'm going to answer your questions first. I think my favorite Australian band when I was a kid, I think as many people might have thought this way, was the Bee Gees. And I really, really, really liked the Bee Gees. And of course, I was too young to see Saturday Night Fever when it came out in 1977. And I got the soundtrack like many other kids. I was 10 years old. I think Saturday Night Fever was 77. But I did know two Bee Gees songs before Saturday Night Fever. And that was Nights on Broadway and Jive Talkin'. And I love those songs as a kid because I listened to a lot of radio when I was a kid. I really liked music. And then after Star Wars, I was a soundtrack only guy. So I started with the Bee Gees. And of course, I think at the top of anybody's list, you got to go for Akadak, AC/DC, man. AC/DC is one of the great Australian bands, if not the greatest Australian band. My favorite Australian band is, in fact, In Excess. And I think I discovered them in the early 80s along with everyone else. I mean, their albums Shaboo Shabba and The Swing. Love those records. And then, of course, when they exploded in America with like Kick, I love In Excess. And by the way, I saw them a couple of times, I think 3 or 4 times live, and they were an incredible live band. Not just Michael Hutchence, but the fact that what is it, the Pengelly, the brothers? Oh my God, they were what a band they were, and a huge fan of In Excess. I was a huge Midnight Oil fan too. Their album 10-9-8-7-6-5-4-3-2-1 that had the nuclear blast craters on the cover, and of course their song Power and the Passion. Love that song. And of course, then I want to say, is it Beds Are Burning, their album that became another monster hit? But I was a big fan of Jimmy Sherman's, or is it Jimmy Sherman's Boxers. I loved Midnight Oil. I was a huge fan. Those are probably my 2 favorite bands. Now, I didn't know much about Jimmy Barnes, and I think a lot of Americans probably don't know much about Jimmy Barnes, but I remember hearing the name Jimmy Barnes. The first time I heard the name Jimmy Barnes is the song they did with In Excess that's on the Lost Boys soundtrack. What I did not know about Jimmy Barnes, that Jimmy Barnes was a frontman of course, one of the great Australian bands, Cold Chisel. Now, Cold Chisel, to be honest, never heard of Cold Chisel in America. Never. Didn't know Jimmy Barnes except for that one song. But when I went in 2005 to work on Superman Returns in Australia for a year, every bar you would go into, like the Aussie crew, I went out and partied with a lot of Aussies because nobody can party like the Aussies can. And although the Japanese come close, and I would say, and so do Bulgarians, to be honest, and Israelis. But people would go, if there was a jukebox in a bar, somebody would invariably put on a Cold Chisel song, especially when people had been drinking, after a couple of pints of Coopers, they would be drinking, and everybody would bust out the Cold Chisel. Everybody knew Cold Chisel. I mean, I'd never heard of this band, and everywhere I went, Cold Chisel. So anyway, but just to not take up this entire chat with that, but those are, and I loved Cold Chisel by the time I left. Isn't Wolf Mother an Australian band? I'd kind of dig Wolf Mother. I'm sure there's a lot more, but that's right off the top of my head. Now, in terms of Australian movies, the first movie, I don't know if you'd call it Australian, but it is set in the Australian outback. The first movie I remember, the movie that entranced me about Australia that I saw as a kid was Walkabout. Nicholas Roeg's Walkabout, which stars Jenny Agutter. And you see a lot of her, and it's great. She, of course, went on to play Jessica in Logan's Run. Big Jenny Agutter fan. But as a kid growing up in Seattle, Peter Weir was really one of the first Australian directors that I really knew a lot about. And the first movie I saw by him was, of course, Picnic at Hanging Rock. And then afterwards, I saw The Last Wave, which I really liked. And my 8th grade anthropology class hated me because I showed The Last Wave because it's all about the Aboriginal dream time. So I was really into that. Then I saw his earlier movie, The Cars That Ate Paris. And then there's like this Australian exploitation biker movie called Stone that's worth seeing. And then, of course, Mad Max and The Road Warrior. I think Breaker Morant's Australian. And of course, I'm a Baz Luhrmann fan. I really liked Romeo and Juliet. I really liked Moulin Rouge, and There's Priscilla, Queen of the Desert's another movie I really liked. There's just yeah, I'm an Australian film fan. There's actually a great documentary about Australian exploitation films, and of course, as everyone knows, anyone who's watched this channel know that I have a beautiful transfer of the Australian exploitation body horror shocker Body Melt that I will not part with for the world. So there you go. But before I get to more talking about the topic at hand, there was another letter that I received that also brought up this issue. And let me see if I can find it. Here we go. This one comes from Mark Skarbek. Mark says, "Hey, Rob, this letter is a response to your one question to the Post-Geek singularity and their significant others, what we watch together. Well, we always binge watch Friends, Big Bang Theory, The Office, and Modern Family together. My wife's two favorite movies are Dirty Dancing and Superbad. This past weekend, we just watched Booksmart together, and oh my, the looks I got when I told her it was better than Superbad. Laugh out loud. Wow, that's interesting. When we first started dating in 2013, I never let on how big of a geek I was. It's always good to gradually sort of bring somebody into that. My approach to women usually took after the two ladies men I grew up on, Captain James Tiberius Kirk and James Bond. Good man. You can never go wrong with that approach. Then it happened. The announcement of The Force Awakens. I was so excited, and she didn't know why. She asked me what I wanted for Christmas from her in 2014, and it was the complete saga on Blu-ray. My wife never saw a Star Wars movie or seemed to have any interest in it. So I ended up doing it the wrong way and showing them to her in chronological order. Oh, no. You got to go machete order, dude. It's machete order. It's Star Wars. It's Empire. It's Attack of the Clones, Revenge of the Sith, and then Jedi, and you don't watch Phantom Menace. I know. Just don't do it. It's machete order. I did the wrong way and showed her them in chronological order. She is not a fan of the prequels, and she still thinks Star Wars: A New Hope is boring because of the beginning. However, she loves Darth Vader. She has her collection of Black Series Darth Vaders and some pops of him. She does like the X-Men and Marvel films, and we go to every Star Wars. She will go to every Star Wars movie with me. She also was caught on that only Disney Star Wars film that I've actually loved was Rogue One. She can tell when I'm conflicted on movie franchises I love. Well, just Star Wars at this point. I would love to sit her down and show her Star Trek, but I don't think she'd like it. Maybe one day. Sorry for the long letter. Sincerely, Mark. Well, how to do this, what to do. See, here, it's easier. You young whippersnappers today have a much easier time of finding significant others that are down with geek culture. Because, as we all know, where are we living? We're living in the post-geek singularity right now. So, for the most part, over the last 25 years, most people have certain geeky interests of some kind, whether it's video games, whether it's anime, whether it's movies and television. There's always a way in, usually with younger members of the post-geek singularity, usually, for the most part. But I've found in my own life, the problem with geeky pursuits, whether they're comic books, whether they're science fiction or horror films, whether they're video games, is that there's an element of dreaming required for all of these things. Like when you play Battlefront, like I've known people, my mother is this way. You've all met my mother. Well, maybe you haven't, but you can go back and watch my Robservations with my mom. My mom was very pragmatic, and she was not an imaginative lady. Now, this is not a criticism. This is just the way that she was. I mean, very practical. She's very sporty, my mom. She golfed, very athletic. She skied when she was younger. But she just didn't understand why I was so interested in make-believe. Now, God bless her, she was very much an enabler of me. When she knew I liked something, she was all in. She was like, whatever you like, son, whatever you need, I will go get it for you, because she knew how much I cherished whatever it was I got. I mean, I was fanatically into these things. So for having a very imaginative, a very unimaginative mother, I had a very good mother in that she was always helpful with me. But she was always, she always gave me she always sort of brought me back down to earth. And in high school, I had some pretty significant long-term relationships with girls. And for the most part, they were very tolerant of what I would drag them to. Sometimes I went a little far. Like I remember taking a girl to see Penelope Spheris's movie. What was it called? Now I'm drawing a blank on it. It was a serial killer movie with Maxwell Caulfield and I want to say Charlie Sheen. And now what? How have I lost this title? The Boys Next Door. That's what it was called. Boy, did that not go over well. Exploitation horror. Really, that was not a movie I would recommend ever taking a date to unless they're really into it. Unless you meet a girl at a punk rock show, don't take her to see The Boys Next Door. Don't even stream it. You got to judge people. That was perhaps I put my own desires in front of perhaps hers, and that was a big mistake, and it was a lesson I have never forgotten. But so what's great, what you need to do is, as long as you have a significant other that appreciates that you are interested in something, I think that's a good thing. But you have to be here's the key to making a relationship work. Here I am, Robservations, relationship advice if you are an imagination connoisseur and your partner is not. You have to be very discerning, and you have to understand that you cannot just dive into these waters and expect somebody to love what you love. They can't. They don't have the context. They don't have the information. They'll never know. And you have to be careful, and it takes work. You can't just pick your favorite. If you know that you're dating somebody that has no interest in fantasy or science fiction or horror or anything, when you get that person to sit down with you, if they're not going to sit down with you and sample what it is you love, then screw them. As Dan Savage would say in his Savage Love column, DTMFA. DTMFA. I won't say what that means, but take Dan Savage's advice, DTMFA. And you got to do that. But if they will sit down with you, and they will, try and find something that's tailored to their interests, because we imagination connoisseurs, we have a wide variety of various things that we like. A lot of movies, a lot of television, a lot of shows that you can find a way in on. I'll tell you a funny story. One thing about my mother is, I wanted to watch a science fiction movie with her, and I'm like, what can I watch with my mother? I remember getting the VHS tape of Silent Running, Douglas Trumbull's seminal science fiction film, Silent Running. It stars Bruce Dern and the robots Huey, Dewey, and Louie. The reason I chose that movie was the premise. My mom had a green thumb. She was always planting things in the garden. She loved her plants. She loved her rhododendron bushes. Our house was beautiful. And even though we had landscapers on the weekends, my mother was always out there planting things and landscaping herself. So Silent Running was a science fiction movie where all of the forests, all the remaining forests in the world are packed up in these giant domes, put on these spaceships, and they're sent out into the solar system to presumably preserve them until the day that pollution on Earth is eventually taken care of. It's kind of a ludicrous, well, it seems less ludicrous now, but I thought that my mom would really understand that. And so we sat down, and I explained to her, and I was probably 14 or something when I don't remember. It was right when Silent Running first came out on VHS. I want to say it was like 81, maybe 82, perhaps later, but I want to say it was early 80s, definitely early 80s. And I explained to her why I wanted to show her the movie, and she sat down, and she totally indulged me. And she sat down, and she actually really enjoyed it. So I was like, okay, that's how you have to be mindful. And it becomes like a fun thing to do, like trying to find something that you love. Like, look, Star Wars is one thing. If somebody hasn't seen a Star Wars movie, even now, that's a little rougher, because you'd think just because of the pop culture zeitgeist that somebody would have at one point sat down to watch a Star Wars movie. But, I have big blind spots in my knowledge too. I mean, I hadn't seen All About Eve, and I'd known it was a classic film. I hadn't watched it. So you have to be discerning, and you have to be really careful when you do this, because you only get one shot. So if you watch something that's totally off-putting, you're done. You're never going to get that trust back. You've got to make sure it's worth their while. And sometimes, there's movies like, it's not an Australian film, but one of my favorite science fiction movies is a low budget New Zealand film that was directed by Jeff Murphy, who directed a movie called Utu, and he also directed second unit work on Lord of the Rings. He recently passed away. Jeff Murphy directed a film called The Quiet Earth, and in the 80s. And if you haven't seen it, it's out on Blu-ray. It's a tremendous film. I really, really love this movie. And it's a Last Man on Earth movie. And it's about a guy who wakes up in the middle of Auckland in New Zealand, biggest city in Auckland, and everyone's gone, disappeared. And one of the things about a movie like that is, even if you're not an imagination connoisseur, even if you're somebody that, you know, is pragmatic like my mother, that kind of a premise will intrigue. You'll always be able to get somebody to, like, because you want to know what happens. It has that built-in, what would I do? My what if, would I axiom that I believe that every audience member asks themselves as they watch a movie, what if this happened and would I act that way? I did a chat about it. But I think all people, as long as you can sort of get in on some sweet spot, that's a premise everybody can immediately gravitate towards and sort of buy into, because they're immediately asking themselves, well, what would I do if that happened? You know, the first science fiction movie I would show a significant other would not be, say, a kaiju movie. You know, I'm not going to hit her with, you got to see Godzilla versus the Astro Monster as her first foray into what I love. It's got to be curated. It's got to be done correctly. And you have to be mindful. Always be mindful. Always be mindful. And I learned this working in video stores, and also when I wanted to show my friends movies. When I first had a VCR, one of my great joys in life was bringing 15 kids over from my junior high school and showing them movies. I loved showing them movies and watch people. I love to share the joy of movies, but I was always mindful that you have to know your audience. It's very important to read your audience. So you've got to ease them into what you like by trying to give them things that they would like, pretty much just like life. And I think that's the way to go. And also, if you're looking for things to stream, like I tend to not foist things onto Elizabeth that I know she might not like. You gotta be mindful of it. But then she'll turn around and she'll say, you got to watch Ozark. I hadn't watched Ozark on Netflix, and she knew I would like it. But it was like, you know, it's a crime family. It's literally a crime family drama. And I really enjoyed it. And I don't think I would have watched Ozark without her pushing me to do so. So I think part of having a great relationship is, if you look upon it, I always look upon it as sharing, as opposed to, you need to watch this so you understand me. You can't do that. What you want to do is turn it into a sharing experience, and you're letting somebody more into your psyche, sort of who you are. And I think that's kind of the way that I would approach it. Let's see, what are people saying? JB Bonifacio says, Rob, will you get the Forky hot toy? Laugh out loud. Probably not. I'm just thinking, probably not. Factual Opinion says, is Brightburn and Anna considered original movies? I'd say they're original movies. They were, I think, of course, Brightburn was a riff on the Superman idea, and Anna is probably a riff on Luc Besson's own La Femme Nikita. But sure, they're original. You know, they're not remakes, but they might take a lot of inspiration from other things. But they're original. Jmeister25 says, will you be seeing Endgame again? I know I will. Well, as many of you know, they announced today that they are going to tag a deleted scene that no one has seen, and a tribute and a bunch of other surprises at the end as a post-credit scene on Endgame in theaters now. They're going to add this next week to get people to come back to the theaters. So I think they want Endgame to beat Avatar and take the #1 highest grossing box office film of all time. And they're doing that with an effort by putting this extra footage at the end of Endgame, and they're hoping that audiences will come in. I hope if it's Michael Peña's character from Ant-Man recapping the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, if that's one of the things that they're doing, I am all in. So yes, I am going to absolutely do that. So I'm in. Alexander Wilson asks a really good question. You say making movies in Hollywood is a well-oiled machine and meticulous, but we have production problems with Hellboy, Dark Phoenix, and Men in Black. What gives? Well, here's the thing. The problems with Men in Black, Hellboy, and Dark Phoenix were not problems based on the making of the films themselves. The actual day-to-day production on these movies was not the problem. It was the overall vision for these movies. With Men in Black, if you've read the Hollywood Reporter article, Walter Parks, we talked about this, who had written the first Men in Black, he wrote War Games back it came out in '83. Industry veteran. I think as you get older and you've been in the business for a long time, you want to make sure, and if you're a writer in Hollywood, you've been beaten up enough. But he made a fatal flaw. He got involved in the process when he shouldn't have. Now, I'm not saying that so what I meant to say, Alexander Wilson, is that when you're actually on the day-to-day, when you're making a movie, for the most part, assuming people know what they're doing and everybody's on the same page, which is something that you have to have. So there's a caveat to that. But a crew is working at peak efficiency. The problems with Dark Phoenix came in what kind of a movie they were trying to make. The problems were before they ever got to set. The problems with Men in Black and Hellboy also started before they got to set, where you had a producer, frankly, overstepping. And that's on them. There's nothing. First of all, there's nothing worse than you can do. There's nothing worse that you can do to a movie crew than to show any kind of dissension on a set. As I've often told people in my vast experience when I've directed, but I've also seen this on many, many sets that I've been on. Basically, a director, some people would say you have a whole day. I don't think so. I think a director, on the first day of a movie, a director has until lunch to convince the crew that they are, in fact, they're in cahoots. They're working for somebody who knows what they're doing. The crew knows whether they're going to have a pleasant experience or an unpleasant experience by lunch on the first day. It's very, very important that your crew, and when I say the crew, I mean everybody below you. And when I say below you, if it's a pyramid and you're the director and you're on top, everybody's below you because all of their work is filtering through your sensibilities. Now, the thing is, if you show weakness and you show indecisiveness, your crew is going to be, because they're there to serve you. And if they don't know what they're doing, and if they don't trust that you know what you're doing, you lose them. And if you lose them, you lose time. What they want is their crew wants to be inspired. They want to be working for somebody, because everybody who's working on a movie, every single person who's working on a film wants it to be great. They might know, they might find out, or they might read the script. You know, there's people who work on films that some of them haven't even read the entire script because they don't need to, believe it or not. But more often than not. And everybody they all believe and hope that they all want to make a movie that's good so they can tell their friends, hey, I worked on this movie. And the worst thing you can possibly do, the worst thing a director and a producer can do, is have open dissent amongst them in front of a crew. Because then the crew doesn't believe in the vision of the movie. And when the producer's saying one thing and the director's saying the other, that is the kiss of death. That is also wildly unprofessional. For all of you filmmakers out there, if you're gonna be a director or you're gonna be a producer, any disagreements you have with your director, or if the producer has if the director has a problem with the producer, or the producer has a problem with the director, those stay behind closed doors. Never, ever show that kind of weakness to your crew. Never, ever, ever do it. Never. And I cannot stress enough. And when you hear about what happened on Men in Black and what happened on Hellboy, I'm like, on those, I would blame the producer. I absolutely would, if those accounts are true. I don't always blame the producer, because I've seen sets where directors are woefully unprepared. They don't know. A director, even if you don't know, here's another Hollywood truism. If you're a director, if you're directing a movie or a television show or whatever, and somebody comes up and asks you a question, never, ever say, I don't know. Never say, I don't know. Now, if you truly don't know, you say, listen, hold that thought. Let me get back to you in just a few minutes, and go figure out an answer for that person. but never say, I don't know. And when you come back to that person, you answer their question to the best of your ability. But when you say you don't know, then what the hell are you doing directing the movie? That's the way I look at it. And so will your crew. Anyway, so that's Dissent with a producer and a director. Because you know what that does, Alexander? That gets in the way of the clockwork precision. Your crew, this is not your crew's problem. What you've done is you've disrespected. If a producer and director are openly fighting, and it happens, look, it happens all the time. It happens in creative environments. But the crew knows if it's a power dispute, if they see a director as being weak and not having full power on the set, they're confused and they don't like that. People want to know that when they go to the director and they get an answer, that is the course of action that is going to be set at least for the next 15 minutes or the next 20 minutes until the next setup. And what you need to do as a director is make sure you get from each setup to each setup during the day and still have your crew on your side. That is of paramount importance. I cannot stress that enough. So if you're a producer, don't yell at your director in front of the crew. Take him or her into a room first. Draco Eris says, Godzilla King of the Monsters is great. Well, Draco, I agree. I loved Godzilla King of the Monsters. A lot of people didn't. I loved it. Willow Yang is here. Hello, Willow. It's nice to have you back. It's nice that we can talk this way, baby. You know what I'm saying? But Willow says, I had the same thought as you did about the Game of Thrones prequel taking place thousands of years ago. Maybe Westeros is culturally stagnant. What Willow is referring to is today on the John Campea show, we were talking about the Game of Thrones prequel, which is set in the Age of Heroes, before the Great Darkness, thousands of years ago in Westeros. And I mean, I'm sure there's filming in Dubrovnik or wherever the hell they're going to be filming the show. But 1,000 years ago, I was like, what are they wearing? Or thousands of years ago, are they wearing like animal pelts, and are they still hunting woolly mammoths? I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see how that works. But 1,000 years or thousands of years ago seems strange to me. If everything looks kind of the same, I mean, I would think it would look more primitive, because certainly if our own history is an example, came pretty far in a couple thousand years. So, you know, I'm with you, Willow. I think you and we park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. Evan Newman says, this is true for intergeek dating too. A female geek I took out was not down with my love of dark movies. She said it was a view into my soul. Oops. Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like when people judge you. I don't like that. That really actually, it bothers me. It bothers me. And I think it's not really fair, to be honest. Christopher Morgan says, he sent me a letter. He says, Christopher Morgan says, hi, RMB. Who goes from watching Chernobyl to Good Omens? Laugh out loud. No wonder the whimsy wasn't enough. Love, Christopher Morgan, CRM. Well, Christopher, look, I think great entertainment is great entertainment. I can jump genres the way Jesse Owens can jump hurdles. Actually, I don't know if he actually did the hurdles, but he ran really fast. You catch my drift. I mean, I think it's important. I think it's important that it's like Stanley Kubrick. He worked in many different genres. I think you can watch something like Chernobyl that's a Debbie Downer for sure, but then you can turn around and watch Good Omens and enjoy them equally because they're both excellent. And I think that there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. This next letter comes from CJ Dunn. Dear Rob, I know you mostly answer letters and talk about Star Trek on this show. Well, that's not true. Come on, CJ. Also, Willow Yang's reports on her journey through the original Star Trek series. Well, I'm writing you today because I would like to talk about a show I recently just watched called LUCIFER. What's funny about LUCIFER is it actually has its origins in Neil Gaiman's portrayal of Lucifer Morningstar in the Sandman comic, which is one of my favorite comics of all time. It's my favorite comic series of all time. At first, I was never really interested in Lucifer. I loathe procedural dramas. They just seem to rehash the same shit every episode with no real emotional growth or character development. I guess you could say I am spoiled, or I was ruined by some of the great shows that steered away from procedural formulas like Game of Thrones, Walking Dead, Sons of Anarchy, Stranger Things, and the Marvel Netflix series. The only other shows I've watched that I loved that have a small procedural formula was Justified and Chuck. Other than that, I've steered clear of the procedural. That was until John Campea just wouldn't shut up about Lucifer. See, every time I'm on the Landscapers Come. So considering we both like some of the same flavors most of the time, I decided to give it a shot. And boy, was I surprised. Although Lucifer does have a minor procedural formula, it is far more deep than I thought. Masked underneath its rich satire and wit is a bona fide look at the human condition through the lens of celestial beings wrote about and portrayed in the Christian religion. I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming. It was absolutely fascinating watching Lucifer, Amandil, and Mazikeen learn what love, family, and the nature of emotions that make us, well, human. The show used biblical nuances and stories from the Bible in such a rich way that not only make you reevaluate religion, but also reevaluate what it really means to be human. The fact that Lucifer had a therapist, and that was part of the show, it never got old. In fact, I think Lucifer's therapy was the heart of the show and the character. Lucifer was an embodiment of us, the viewer. He represented the devil we sometimes see in ourselves and the emotional roller coasters we go through. Hang on a second. Hold on. I'm going to turn off my sound for a minute so you don't have to hear me yell at the dogs. Sorry about that, but I just took care of the dogs. Now they won't bark at, well, they might bark some more, but they're not going to go out and bother the landscape artists. Let me go back. The fact that Lucifer had a therapist that was part of the show, it never got old. In fact, I think Lucifer's therapy was the heart of the show, and the character Lucifer was an embodiment of us, the viewer. He represented the devil we sometimes see in ourselves and the emotional roller coasters we go through in trying to understand the effect we have on the people around us, as well as the people we love when we don't deal with our own demons. The journeys of both Amandil and Mazikeen are both similar, and their relationship with Lucifer and each other, as well as the human characters, all help in some way to make them better individuals. Anyway, I just wanted to drop off my thoughts on Lucifer and encourage your viewers who may not have seen the show yet to check it out. Thanks for all you do, CJ Dunn. Well, CJ, as you know, John Campea is a huge fan of Lucifer, and I have to tell you, I've really enjoyed. I started watching because of John as well, and I think the show's quite good, and it's wildly entertaining, and the central performance is fantastic. Lucifer is an amazing character. I love the actor that plays him, and if you guys want to watch something fun, it's on Netflix now, and I think it is, in fact, a hoot. I can't recommend it more. It's really, really, really a cool show. And I love the fact that it really is based on the Lucifer from Neil Gaiman's The Sandman, which I really, really love. Alexander Wilson says, the Game of Thrones prequel showrunner is Jane Goldman, and it was announced last year. The show is going to be about the battle between men and the children of the wood and the origins of the White Walkers. Yeah, you know, it's funny. After Game of Thrones, I just don't care about the White Walkers anymore because they had an ill-conceived plan that led nowhere. But, you know, maybe it'll be good. Now we get to another letter. I love these letters. You know, here's one of the things that I have to say that I love about you guys, the Imagination Connoisseur community. I like the fact that people feel that this is a place that they can belong to. And I have to say, you got to give it up for our moderators. You got to give it up for Mike Broaden. You got to give it up for Detective Jim. You got to give it up for Terry in the UK and my friend Greg Smith for using their moderator powers for good. They're wielding their powers of good to make this an inviting place for people that even when you have dissenting opinions, if you provide them, or maybe not dissenting opinions, but just different opinions, if you share them and provide them and approach them in a way that's palatable to all, which I think is possible. I just don't understand why people can't. Why is there so much this? I don't know. Why are people angry at each other? Why can't we talk to each other? In that sense, Mark C., who's written me a lot of letters, has another letter. Mark Churay has another letter. Now, Mark has called himself a toxic fan, and he's a member of the group of YouTubers known as the Fandom Menace, which I think is actually a pretty cute title. But he wrote me another letter, and I'm going to share it because I like it. I think it's good. but I warn you, again, a little controversial. So here it goes. Mark Churay says, "Hail, notorious RMB. Strap in and grab your tinfoil hats, folks. This is going to be a long one." It's not that long, though, Mark. "I would like to see if I understand your position on Miss Kathleen Kennedy, as well as explain mine. I would also like to do my best to explain why the Fandom Menace and Comicsgate exist. After this, positive letters only, I promise." I think all of your letters have been positive, frankly. I mean, I like the fact that you are discussing issues of the day and certainly relevant to the Imagination Connoisseur community and the Post-Geek Singularity community, because many of these, it was funny, like Dictor von Doomcock, Dictor Don or Dictor von, I'm a huge fan of Doomcock, but I never thought of him as the Fandom Menace or part of the Fandom Menace. I guess he is. But yeah. So he goes on to say, "I look at your angle on the Kathleen Kennedy situation like this, and see if I understand. As an artist, I'm contracted by a client to create a painting of a subject determined by the client. I send my girlfriend to the art supply store to pick up the paint, brushes, palette, and canvas. After creating the painting, I show it to the client, and it is not what he was looking for. Does the client get mad at my girlfriend for the piece? Of course not. She had nothing to do with its creation besides providing the tools. That's how I believe you see the situation. Imagine now that my girlfriend is also the CEO of our illustration company and is responsible for providing the tools and communicating the needed information to create a piece that will please the customer. At this point, she is established as the captain of the ship." Gilbert, please. Gilbert. Oh, now they're both barking. "As captain, I'm sorry about this because I can't put him outside because the landscapers are mowing the lawn. As the captain, she is responsible for the crew under her command. In other words, right or wrong, if you put that title, head of the studio, on your door, the heat is yours. You may remember 20 years ago, Disney was floundering. Well, I would say 30 years ago. Michael Eisner took the heat, not film directors. He had a petition website, Save Disney, devoted to remove him. It was started by Walt Disney's brother, Roy. There's a little bit of a story there. Kennedy is a hell of a producer, but historically, the corporate head gets the praise and takes the heat. She has been treated like every other corporate leader who has managed to upset a good portion of their customer base. True equality." Now, to the big discussion. First of all, let me stop you right there. And I'm going to interrupt that. You're taking the position that the movies under Kathleen Kennedy's regime since 2012 have somehow disappointed the customer base. The facts don't bear that out. The box office does. And I agree. Like, I don't, as much as I even said I liked The Last Jedi, I don't think Last Jedi or The Force Awakens are particularly great movies. And I don't think they're particularly great Star Wars movies, but they were very financial. I have a problem with Rogue One. I think Rogue One's good. I don't think it's great. But I don't necessarily think that you have to. The problem that exists with these movies. Star Wars, the problem with Star Wars exists because one man, rightly or wrongly, it was the product of his vision. It came from George Lucas. Once he sold Star Wars to Disney, the dynamic changed. It was now owned by a corporation and not owned by a creative entity who was telling the stories that he wanted to tell. The whole reason for Star Wars to exist is different. Kathleen Kennedy can't be blamed for that. She took over Lucasfilm, Lucas handpicked her, and she's been doing, despite the hiccups, and man, there were a lot of hiccups, but she managed to pull those things out of the fire. The fact that you might not like, or the fact that many Star Wars fans, first of all, Star Wars fans, and the fact that we're still talking about Kathleen Kennedy and all this is in a way in itself, it proves how crazy all of this is. It truly, Star Wars fans, just like Star Trek fans, live up to the word fanatic. And I would consider myself as part of those things. But I just, like the James Bond franchise has Broccoli as Barbara Broccoli and Michael Wilson. Have they done the best job as stewards of that franchise? I don't know. But Kathleen Kennedy, from a business perspective, she's made 4 movies and 3 of them made over $1 billion. From Disney's perspective, that's winning. Disney doesn't care. about anything other than the movies that they can talk about and say, hey, our movies made $1 billion on a 200 million spend. That's a huge profit margin for them. Huge profit margin for a movie. That's about as successful as movies get. And even when you have a movie like Solo, which, by the way, you can, if you amortize the costs of everything that happened with Solo, even though it was obviously disappointing, it wasn't a disaster the way, say, Star Trek Beyond was. And it wasn't a disaster the way, and Star Trek Beyond, people think it made money. And it certainly wasn't an X-Men Dark Phoenix. But anyway, so I think the problem is that the fundamental reason why Star Wars exists now has changed from when George Lucas had it. That's the disconnect. That's the problem. It's not Kathleen Kennedy. It's not even Bob Iger. It's the fact that something that was once the product of one man's artistic vision is now owned by a studio that honestly doesn't understand what vision is. They're hoping to hire people that become visionaries and create something that's good. And Kathleen Kennedy is doing her best to make sure that that happened. You know, when she hired Lord Miller, that was a great hire. On a spreadsheet and probably meeting them, they came off really well. She didn't know that they were going to say toss aside Lawrence Kasdan's script and start improvising. Why would they do that? She hasn't had filmmakers. That's not her experience after 35 years in the business. But anyway, let me go in. Now to the big discussion. Mark goes on. What is a social justice warrior? Why are they bad? Doesn't everyone believe social justice and diversity are a good thing? Of course it is. Real diversity and inclusion helps us learn about other cultures and groups, which can only make humanity stronger. That's a social justice advocate, not a social justice warrior. A social justice warrior, or the far left progressive radicals we've discussed here, claims to believe in diversity, but what they actually want is group think. Now, I agree with you there, 100%. Imagine whole groups of people calling others fascist, yet they don't see that their own tactics would give George Orwell nightmares. If you are doxxed and find yourself against them, they will swarm your social media, call your work to get you fired, call child protection services to have your children removed, call the police to have you swatted in the hopes that maybe it will cost you your life. We call this cancel culture. I understand it sounds very tinfoil hat, but I've witnessed every part of it personally. Look, I've witnessed some of it too. I've watched lots of YouTube videos that I saw this happen to an esteemed professor at the college that I went to, Evergreen State. It happened to Brett Weinstein. I watched a very esteemed Harvard law professor, a dean, who took on the defense of Harvey Weinstein because that's his job as a lawyer. He was kicked out of the dorm that he at Harvard, no less. The guy's an esteemed professor of Harvard law, and he was a lawyer that because he took the Harvey Weinstein case, he gets pilloried by his own students, and they want to run him off campus when the basic tenets of our justice system say that everybody gets representation until they're proven guilty. And yet students are like, I don't feel safe when you're representing Harvey Weinstein. What, you don't feel safe because he's doing his job? I mean, it was utterly ridiculous. And this is at Harvard. Harvard students were getting him. I mean, him and his wife had to leave. I mean, don't you pay to go to Harvard so you can have professors like him teach you? But just because you don't like the fact that he has to take a job on, that's what he's supposed to do by trade, and you don't like the fact that he's defending somebody you think is a douchebag? No, I agree with you 100%. This is terrible. Cancel culture is the worst. It is horrible, and there's people on my side of the aisle. Anyway, let me continue. Little by little, they found their way into pop culture. You suggest that people outside the Hollywood LA scene really don't understand the film business. You're probably right. But I also suggest that the West Coast film scene has no idea what the pulse of the rest of the country is like. Worse, the data they do get is corrupted. It's corrupted. There's lots going on as I'm trying to do this live stream. Social justice warriors have discovered that entertainment takes the pulse of the people at large by what's trending. Hang on. Let me yell at the dogs again. This is important. I'm getting through this letter. This is an important letter. Okay. So the LA scene really don't understand the film business. You're probably right. But I also suggest that the West Coast film scene has no idea what the pulse of the rest of the country is like. Worse, the data they do get is corrupted. Social justice warriors have discovered that entertainment takes the pulse of the people at large by what's trending on Twitter. Wonder why Twitter seems so angry? It is the hive for social justice warriors. They've learned to affect what's trending with a constant barrage of hashtags and tweeting 150 to 200 times a day to stack the deck. In reality, it's figured they make up about 2% of social media. They're just organized. Don't believe me? Grab that tinfoil hat again, a Discord thread that just came to light about how they could falsify evidence and get at the legal defense funding of an anime voice actor they've been trying to ruin, as well as ruin the reputation of his lawyer. This is what social justice warriors do. The Fandom Menace say mean things and try and vote with their wallets. Who's really toxic here? Look, I don't disagree, but here's another thing. You can always turn off social media. You can turn off Twitter, you can turn off and get these jobs done. The reason that they're able to do this is because that voice actor in question was also active on social media. Leave social media. As previously stated, many artists within Marvel and DC have lost their jobs due to social justice warrior influence for being conservative and Christian, two things which these radicals hate. So since Twitter is a hive of social justice warriors, a group of pundits got on YouTube to point out where they have taken over pop culture. Later, those comic pros who were fired or left did the same thing, when they used the platform to make more money than they ever have. What's Comicgate and the Fandom Menace's goal? To point out where social justice warriors are trying to change pop culture. Why not let them, you ask? Because getting their message spread is more important than telling good stories. This is why when the feminist message dominates the marketing over story for Captain Marvel, you get what seem to be hate videos. When Star Trek Discovery began its marketing, the fact that it had a woman of color as the lead seemed more important than the story. Yeah, okay, I would agree with that, especially because we already had a show that had a woman as a lead, and we already had another Star Trek show that had a black man as the lead. So this idea that Star Trek Discovery was somehow woker than Star Trek has ever been was absurd. I agree with that. When Doctor Who announced a woman as Doctor, fine. Then the story took a backseat to the fact that the companion seemed to have a deadbeat dad. Social justice warriors seem to have a thing against straight white males, even dads. Don't believe that? You still have a tinfoil hat, right? I left comics after picking up an issue of the Avengers. The roster had changed, but the names didn't. Captain America was now black. Thor was a woman. Hawkeye was a woman. Iron Man was a black teenage girl. The Hulk was now Asian, and Nick Fury was now black. Well, the old versions were sidelined in an attempt to wash them away. Of themselves, there's nothing wrong with these characters, and would love to see them add to the landscape. But that's not why they were created. They were replacements for 50-plus-year-old characters, all of which were straight white males. Is this a big deal? On a microscopic level, it's trading one oppression for another. But to these people, since it's straight white males, it's okay. So I really love the letter Tuesday that critiqued The Last Jedi. Neither it or The Force Awakens have much of an actual story. But did Johnson have an agenda to deliver? First came Celebration Orlando and the Force's female shirts. By the way, that was a Nike thing, first of all. The idea that Star Wars might be the next place we see social justice warrior virtue signaling seemed possible. The Last Jedi had 3 plot threads. We have Rey telling Luke to get back into the fight. We have Rose telling Finn that rich people are bad, saving animals but leaving children in slavery. And we have Holdo telling Poe to shut up and be a good soldier. After talking to friends in the military, Holdo should not have held back that info. You have less than 500 troops, and demoted or not, Poe is still a part of the command structure and well-liked. By the way, notice a pattern in the 3 plot holes or plot threads in the male and female relationships. Tinfoil hat, I admit this could be true paranoia. But see, here's the thing, man. Here's why I disagree with all of this. We live in a society that's constantly evolving, constantly moving forward. Things are changing all the time. We just happen to be living now through a period of time where there were marginalized people that didn't have much of a voice, and now they're getting a voice. Now, right now, their voice is more important than the stories they're telling. I find that annoying. I think absolutely I won't call them social justice warriors, but I think now is a time when agendas are being pushed forward instead of necessarily good storytelling. But this is a necessary function of change. We're just in the middle of that change. You're watching that change. If you would come 20 years later, all of this will settle down and things will have gotten back to normal, or a little bit more back to normal. But right now we're going through a period of time where social media has now reached I guess it's now 21. Social media can drink now. So we're dealing with that. We're dealing with rapid increases in technology. We're dealing with rapid increases in migration. There's all kinds of people moving around the world and going places and doing things that they've never done before. All of these things, politics. I wish that the Fandom Menace would be paying as much attention to our political structure as they are to these movies and comic books and things like that, because we're in the middle of rather than see this as an us versus. I don't get the us versus them thing. I don't. And look, agenda-based storytelling is never going to work anyway. It's never going to work because ultimately people want to hear good stories. And if your agenda is at the first and foremost, your primary reason for telling a story, you're going to fail anyway. And those things will be weeded out in the marketplace. You have to have faith. You have to have faith ultimately in the audience. I have faith in the audience. I've always seen that people tend to gravitate toward things that are good. Ultimately, the things that are bad, for the most part, I don't know why Dukes of Hazzard stayed on the air for as long as it did, but ultimately the audience is going to find things that they want and that they like, and they will reject the things that they don't want and that they don't like. And I don't think, nobody is sitting down. I guarantee you, nobody is sitting down. Star Wars especially began. Who is the first human character we meet in Star Wars? It's Princess Leia. And Princess Leia, what is the first thing she does? She stands up to Darth Vader. The Imperial Senate will not sit still for this. When they hear you've attacked a diplomatic, she's fronting to Darth Vader. She's lying to his face. Star Wars begins with a woman of great power, if not great stature, who stands up to Vader. Christ, if Star Wars had opened today, people are like, oh my God, this movie has an agenda. This little tiny 5-foot Spitfire stands up to Darth Vader, the most powerful villain in the universe. Come on. But that's where Star Wars began. So when people start going off about Holdo and this, I'm like, give me a break. Star Wars began with a strong female character. That was the first person that we met. She stood up to Tarkin. She lied to Tarkin and stood by and watched Alderaan destroyed as she even tried to lie to the two of them in the face of the destruction of her homeworld. She tried. She was a baller. So this idea that having this agenda, this female agenda, the Force is female. The Force is freaking female since the opening scene of Star Wars in 1977. So I reject this notion. I reject this notion that having strong female characters is somehow agenda-based, especially in Star Wars. Queen Amidala in Attack of the Clones. She's out there fighting in the arena, man. It's like there's not a lot of, what the real problem is with Star Wars, the way I see it? There's no real romance. It's stunted the emotional and sexual development of young men across the planet for 40 freaking years. Get with the program. I hate to say it, but go to Star Trek. Captain Kirk will teach you how to be the space Mac. You're not going to learn that from Star Wars. And now it seems to me like everybody's just kind of scared. But anyway, let me continue. The Force, tinfoil hat theory, or the Force is truly female. But we are 2/3 through a trilogy and we still don't know what that story is about. It feels as though the three main actors were chosen to be female, a person of color, Latino, and white. Character development be damned. Sad too, I think all four are amazing actors. Coincidence that the villain is the only white male? Okay, maybe I need to get this metal cone off my head. Look, you got to start thinking globally here too. The fact is that movies are now for global audiences, and it's not just women. And by the way, here's what I don't get. What's the problem with having more people of color and women and different ethnicities in roles? We're living in a global environment now. There's less white people in the world than there are, say, East Indians or Chinese people. And that's what you got to remember. We're catering to the globe now. We're also something else that is ending is the Western dominance of culture. It's all part of an evolutionary process. I read a series of books called Chung Kuo, and it's basically science fiction novels about, they take place 600 years hence, where China runs the world. Look in Firefly. Why did the world speak Chinese? No one's going like, oh, look at that. I mean, it's just, we're in an evolutionary process. And I think you should be more angry about bad storytelling. But this idea that everybody has this agenda to push, everybody's agenda is to make money. They're trying to make money. They're trying to appeal to more people. That's what they're trying to do. You know, the social justice thing and the Twitter mobs and all that, and the people in schools and the far left progressives, as I've said, they're going to come for me too. Those people scare me because they have the level of intelligence and their quick fuses, and it just drives me crazy. Anyway, what does the Fandom Menace and Comicsgate want? The ultimate hope would be to push these radicals out of pop culture and get back to telling stories instead of treating characters as agendas. Archetypes, not stereotypes, have a few archetypes, not stereotypes. There's no period there. Have a few gotten too ugly with people? Yes. I don't condone berating anyone for liking or wanting to like something. You've mentioned that our vitriol has yet to translate to dollars. In film, not yet, but Get Woke, Go Broke has already made a financial impact in the gaming and comic industries, which I know. Merchandising for popular pop culture IPs is down across the board, but also that's because the world is changing. It's evolving. Star Trek didn't even bother to make any. Until the political agendas stop and the story takes center stage again, expect people to try and point out issues in an effort to at least keep things from getting worse. Sorry if this sounds like a manifesto, but I did warn you to keep those tinfoil hats at the ready. As for me, why did I join? After all, I love bad movies. Megaforce, Heart Beeps, Full Moon's Oblivion, Robot Jocks, and even Hawk the Slayer. You know, I worked at Full Moon for a number of years. Not just the old ones, but new ones that are just for him and his generation. Pardon me. I have a son. I want him to explore and discover great stories well told. Not just old ones, but new ones that are just for him and his generation. I want him to think for himself and not be brainwashed by an agenda to conform that's sewn into his pop culture. After all, that's what we all had. I thank you again for the forum, Rob. We don't expect everyone to agree with us, but we do want to be understood. You have been the only one willing to listen. Thank you, and thanks for the chat and indulging and tolerating me. Live long and prosper, Mark Churay. Well, is anybody even still here? So here's the thing. Here's the thing about this. I, too, am only interested in great stories well told. But when it comes to things like, say, social justice has been inherent in all storytelling since pretty much the dawn of time. I mean, look at the Twilight Zone, the classic Twilight Zone, which ran from 59 to 64. All of those stories are asking us as people to try and be better. Now, what's happening now, and I see this as a function of, there's a lot of people, there's many different reasons why this is happening. A lot of it has to do with social media, but we're just going through a time of change. And here's the thing. What we shouldn't be necessarily fighting against all of this in an adversarial way, because it's all going to get burned down that way. We're all going to lose. We're going to have Americans at each other's throats because somebody believes that there's too many girls in their comic books. I mean, we're going in that direction. And what I find really interesting is I see in Comicsgate and Gamergate and all of these things, there is, in fact, I think, a deep element of misogyny that exists. And it's there, and I think it's pretty ugly. But what we really want, I agree with the Fandom Menace, or if you're speaking for them as and I watch Fandom Menace channels. I do. I watch Geeks and Gamers. I watched, of course, Doomcock. I like all the people over at Midnight's Edge a great deal, and I really like Gary Beekler. I like what he's doing. But I think someone like, to me, Gary Beekler, he's on my side too. We just want to see great stories. I just tend to see the glass as being half full, and I think Gary sees more an empty glass than I do. But for the most part, I think most of these people, they see we all want great stories well told. That's what we're all looking for. But we also have to remember that we, middle-aged white cis males like myself, we had a genre pretty much to ourselves for a long time. And it took, I waited decades to meet a pretty girl in a comic book store. The girl that inspired Free Enterprise, I met her at Comic-Con back in 1994. And this girl, Tanya Brinza, and she was the sexiest, most alluring girl I'd ever met at a comic book convention at that time. in the intervening from 94 to 2019, that's completely changed. There's gender parity, there's multi-generations. The whole world has changed. The whole world of Imagination Connoisseurs has changed, and it's great. So now we have a lot of people that were marginalized or didn't have voices. And I think, yes, there has definitely been an overcorrection about these things. But remember, the very idea of the characters in Star Wars and the very idea of comic book characters and superheroes especially came from a different time, a time that was, lest we forget, completely dominated by white men. I mean, the very idea of a superhero, what we need is we need more voices to come in to sort of change this viewpoint. And I understand, I get where it's going. I've always looked at it, though, as being more interesting. Like, I don't think a dude would have written Ursula K. Le Guin's Left Hand of Darkness. I just don't think that they would have. I mean, I remember I was reading when, God, what was the name? There was a horror label The Abyss. There was a paperback label that was started called the Abyss line of horror novels. And they had a lot of female writers like Melanie Tem and Kathy Koja and authors like that. And I was not a big fan of the female authored Abyss line of horror. And I was asking myself, because I bought them all and read them, and I'm like, why don't I like the books as much by... I mean, I haven't had a problem with genre authors. I loved Yvonne Navarro, and stuff like that, who wrote these great vampire books. And I realized that, and I've loved Anne Rice and I've loved, Ursula K. Le Guin. So why wasn't I digging these horror novels that these women were writing? And I realized that I was more of a plot-driven guy. Like, I love elaborate plots and I followed story. Whereas Melanie Tem's books and Nancy Holder and Kathy Koja, their books were more emotionally based. And when I had this revelation myself, when I realized, I'm like, oh, what I was bringing to their books was unfair. I was expecting them to be writing the same way that I expected all horror novels to be written. And when you had people like Poppy Bright, and you had horror novelists, like Kathy Koja or Melanie Tem, they were different voices. And suddenly I would read their books and with a different tinfoil hat on or whatever. And I was like, wow, if I sort of change my thinking and dive into these books from a different perspective, well, then they mean something different and I can get more out of them. Now, I don't know if I necessarily liked them because they weren't necessarily the greatest of books, but once I came at something from a different perspective, I'm like, so the problem wasn't them. The problem was sort of me. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that Star Wars: The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi are great movies. I don't necessarily think that's the case at all. But I do think that it's nice to see different voices. It's just, we're going through a period of time where, fueled by social media, fueled by the connections we've made, we've got a lot of people that can share their ire and anger more than they ever had before. And it's interesting because people would rather share their ire and be snarky and witty online than share, like, look at the world we live in, man. I got glass cases full of hot toy figures. Look, I got Jarrell. How many people have Jarrell, the Jarrell hot toy figure that came out with Superman Returns back in 2006? I got that Jarrell figure. I've had that Jarrell hot toy for 13 years. Anyway, that doesn't mean anything. But I just think that rather than be so angry, write the stories that you want. Rather than complain about, I keep coming back. I worked with this director who was, I thought, a complete egomaniac. And I'll say this, his name was Robin Armstrong. And he was going to direct Free Willy, but he got scared, cold feet. And after 6 weeks before the movie was going to start shooting, he quit. He quit Free Willy because he didn't think the script was good. I think he was just scared. But I liked him. And I went to work for him for a year. And the reason I went to work for him for a year is he made one feature film. He made this low-budget feature film that Miramax released called Pastime, which is a minor league baseball story that I thought was a beautiful story. I really liked the movie a lot. And that's why I wanted to work with him. I wanted to work with the guy that made that movie. Even though he quit Free Willy, I was like, I was like Renee Zellweger in Jerry Maguire. Jerry Maguire quit, and I was Renee Zellweger. I went to go work for Robin Armstrong, and we had a good time for a year. But then he ended up not making another movie because I think he was scared. He got offered Cool Runnings. I think he got offered The Mighty Ducks, and he's like, "Oh, these scripts aren't good," because he wanted to make the Great American Movie. And I'm like, dude, it's a process, bro. But the reason I wanted to work with him most of all is because in this movie Pastime, there's an actor named Noble Willingham who plays the coach of this minor league baseball team, and he's telling the main character, who's a sort of over-the-hill pitcher who's past his prime, hence Pastime. It was great. He was past his time, and of course, baseball being the greatest American pastime. I thought the whole movie was a delightful movie if you want to see it. But in the movie, the coach says, "Listen, man," and this has resonated with me forever since the early 90s when I first saw it. Noble Willingham says, "It doesn't matter how good somebody else is. It doesn't make you any better or any worse." And I've tried to live my life that way. I absolutely believe that. Now, a lot of other douchebags can't quite get that through their heads. They're jealous and petty and whatever. I'm not saying that's what the Fandom Menace is. I'm saying that might be particular people that I'm dealing with in my life right now in various capacities, usually through instruments of the law. But it doesn't matter how good somebody else is. It doesn't make you any better or any worse. And I think that's incredible. And what I would like to see more energy devoted towards is telling those stories that people want to tell. And like you said, with Comicsgate, those comics creators went and found outlets to make the stories that they wanted to make, which I think is great. But now, why does that have to come along with pillorying other people? I mean, the way to win is to go out and win and to create and make new things. No one can ever take that away from you. I've always said, let your work be the locomotive that pulls you, the caboose, down the track. Because once the work's done, no one can take it away from you. You did it. And I just think that we spend all this time when I hear somebody like Kathleen Kennedy again get pilloried for, she has a tough job. She's got to run Lucasfilm and make sure these movies are getting made. And it might not be, do I think they're the movies that they should have made? No. I think that Disney, if anyone, blame Disney. Blame Disney. Because a corporation has a different reason for wanting to tell a story than, of course, a individual does. And George Lucas, sure, he wanted to make money, but George Lucas wanted to be a filmmaker first and foremost. That's what he was trying to do. Disney is a corporation. Their job is to make money. That's what their job is. Draco Era says, Alien is my favorite horror series. Awesome shirt and xenomorph head in the back. I always forget that's there. Well, thank you, Draco. I'm a huge fan of the Alien franchise as well. And by the way, if I just might give a shout out to my buddy Charlie de Lazarica, he posted today is actually it's June 19th. 30 years ago today, Charlie Lazarica and I were in Westwood. We were both at the world premiere of Batman. It was in two different theaters. It was at the Bruin, and it was at the Fox. And I was in the Bruin, and I was sitting in the same row as Jack Nicholson 30 years ago today. But Charlie de Lazarica, of course, did all the incredible documentaries for Blade Runner on the 5-disc set, and he also did the incredible documentaries on the Alien anthology for all 4 movies. And I'm going to give a shout out, but Charlie posted on his Facebook page pictures. I didn't know that he was also at the world premiere of Batman, so we were at the same screening together, even though we didn't know each other. And they have a video. I wonder if I was on the video because I knew where I was standing. So amazing. It's 30 years ago today since the world premiere of Batman that I was at with my friend Charlie. But if you like the Alien movies, get his Blu-ray, the Alien Anthology set, because his documentaries are incredible, especially the documentary on the making of Alien 3. So thanks, Draco. Thanks for the support on the channel. Aaron H. says, I'm going to treat the Thrones prequel the way I treat an ex-girlfriend. I'm going to hear what she has to say, but I'm probably not going to be really interested or emotionally involved for the sake of my sanity. So I always look at it differently. When an ex-girlfriend contacts me, I think to myself, we had a lot of fun together. Perhaps we could have fun together again. Maybe not. I mean, not right now. I mean, if I wasn't involved, you know what I'm saying. Mark C says, I don't fear or have a problem with strong females or a diverse group of characters. Why do they have to show their strength by slamming nothing but white males? Well, okay, Mark, I agree with you. But the problem is we've been on the top of the pyramid. We've been on the top of the pecking order. And for the last, 2,000 years, white men have been responsible for a lot of the ills of the world, and we've certainly haven't been that nice. Now, do I believe that we should trade one oppression for another? No, I've said that on the show a million times. I am a cis white male. You know, I've tried to be nice. I've always tried to practice my ladies first philosophy. I have some pretty good references to that effect if you want them. But I do think that we have to recognize that there was a lot of oppression going on in the world. And we're now living through a period of time where the tables are turning, but it will shake out in the end, assuming we don't turn into a really crazy socialist fascist nation, because that never goes well. It doesn't work. The 20th century was a litany of bad socialist ideas and where they led. And I think, I think a combination of democratic socialism is where it's at. We have socialistic programs in this country. We have socialism to a certain extent. But yeah, Mark says, as a white cis male who loves genre, I say new voices should pull up a chair to the table. I welcome the company. That doesn't mean I should have to give up my seat. But see, listen to what you're saying. There's people that never even could get a seat in the first place. Maybe it's time, I'm just saying, that we all take a step back. We all take a step back and let people that hadn't been heard get heard for a while. Because those people are going to have to put up or shut up too. Anybody that has their agenda-based storytelling, they're going to end up having to make money for somebody, and it's going to fail. Agenda-based storytelling, agendas are part of every story. But how great a story is how slyly those are. Every story. Braveheart, what is that story about? Gladiator, what is that story about? I mean, every story has an agenda. Every story has a political point of view in it. Every story does. Every story has a point. It's just great storytellers aren't didactic about their points that they're trying to make. That's what we need. We need great storytellers. I don't know if people know how to tell stories anymore. I mean, to me, in my mind, I think our entertainment is getting more simplistic as we go by. That worries me more than anything else. That we're becoming less and less intelligent and nuanced. That everything, you're either for me or you're against me, and there's no middle ground. That's terrifying. It's terrifying to me, and it doesn't make for good storytelling. Alexander Wilson was talking about Joe Rogan and Kevin Hart said that it's a lot easier to say something sucks than actually create change. Plus, winners don't post on social media. Jordan and Kobe don't post to social media because they are winners. Yeah, what was Sean Connery's quote? His great quote in The Rock. Somebody said it before. Let's see, The Rock, Sean Connery. It's one of the great quotes in any movie, and it's in a Michael Bay movie. Losers. Let's see if I can get this quote. I'll just call it up. Here it is. This is one of the great. This is. Here's what Sean Connery's character said in The Rock about doing your best. Your best? Losers always whine about their best. Winners go home and fuck the prom queen. That was a great line. You couldn't say that today because somebody would probably say hashtag that's terrible. But the sentiment is correct. Losers always talk about doing their best. Winners get it done. And now you can't even talk about winners. I'm more interested in the fact that we can no longer even celebrate. Forget social justice warriors and agendas. Why not celebrate excellence? Why not celebrate being the best of the best? I don't care whether you're a minority. I don't care whether you're a man. I don't care whether you're a woman. How about just being the best at what you do? That's why I loved Star Trek so much. It's because the people in it were the best of the best. They were all great at their jobs. There was none of this. The thing I object about when it comes to Star Trek Discovery is most of the people on those ships seem like they're freaking idiots and they don't belong where they're at. I wouldn't want those people. I wouldn't want the people on the Discovery to be at the forefront of exploration to further our knowledge. Are you kidding me? Star Trek Discovery, that's the Discovery in Star Trek is the first starship I've never wanted to hang out on. I mean, have they done anything in 2 seasons? I mean, really, have they done anything? Have they been effectual at all? I mean, they've created more problems for themselves than they've solved. But anyway, that's just me. I mean, I'm an elitist. Why not? Whatever happened to being great, to learning as much as we can about things and to celebrate scientific achievement and celebrate personal achievement? Like at school, you know what? I knew that I was never going to be the greatest basketball player on the team. I did play basketball for a while, boys club basketball, and then I realized I liked playing basketball, and all the people I was playing with were better than me, so they went on and joined the school teams. And a lot of the people I used to play basketball with when I was in junior high and elementary school went on to win the state championship at my high school during my senior year. I was like, good on those guys. They're awesome. I didn't think to myself, well, I'm a lesser human being because I can't play basketball as well as they could. I recognized I couldn't play basketball as well as they could. I could still sit down and enjoy them doing what they did, which was a job well done. And that's a good thing. I don't understand why people think that's not a good thing. And I think right now, let these people have their time. Let anybody who wants to have a voice and be heard, let them tell their stories. Let them go out and give us, what do I always say? Every person has a story to tell. You just have to listen. I really believe that. The problem is eventually bad storytelling is going to fall by the wayside because people are going to get sick of it. Agenda-based storytelling never works. You know, I'm working on a children's book right now, The Girl Who Could See the Forest Through the Trees. And that's the name of the children's book that my girlfriend Elizabeth is painting all the paintings for. And that's kind of the gist of the story. At the end of the day, it's all about allowing things to evolve and develop and realize, you know, it's like Renee Belloc said, you bury this in the sand, you know, it becomes a part of history. This is history or whatever. This is history. We're just passing through history. But it's what we should be doing is all of these people should be facilitating and helping everybody who wants their voice heard, help everybody else become better storytellers. I just want to read good comics. And yeah, I think, like you said, get woke, go broke. You know, I watch a lot of people on YouTube that are saying that. I like those pundits. I like people like Joe Rogan. I watch Dave Rubin as well because I like his deep dive interviews. I watch all those people, and people are saying a lot like, get woke, go broke. Yeah, because you can't ever get rich on an agenda only. You can't do that. You've got to provide people with great stories well told. At the end of the day, agendas are going to kill you unless your story has an agenda incorporated into the story in such a way that it works. At least, I don't know. That's kind of the way I think. But anyway, you know, what is distressing to me is that we have such dissent in our fan community and that there are people at each other's throats. And I understand if you've lost your job and there's a lot of people now, I hear it all the time. I get it on Twitter. I got it today. AOC was sort of trying to equivocate and make it sound like what's happening on the southern border of the United States is somehow at all close to Nazi Germany. Newsflash, it's not. Not at all. Is what's happening on the border terrible? Sure. It has nothing to do with Nazi Germany. It's not even close. We are not, people are trying to, we're like Germany in the 1930s. Really? Is our economy depressed because we're paying war reparations because of World War I to the winning factions? I mean, no, we're not there yet. We have our own problems. We're not Nazi Germany. And I don't like it when as a Jew, when people try and marginalize or equate what happened in the Holocaust, where an entire population of Europe was systematically, literally being shoved into ovens and burned alive or gassed or any number of horrible things. It's not the same. Will we get there someday? Perhaps, but then we can start equating ourselves to Nazis. But anyway, you know, look, Mark C's letter was, we go from talking about whether or not we can share what we love as imagination connoisseurs with our significant others to talking about the Fandom Menace. Look, I don't know if you guys follow what happened to Dictor on Doomcock the other day, but it was kind of cool what happened. How in a nutshell, Doomcock, if you don't know Doomcock, is a YouTube personality. He had been blocked on Twitter by William Shatner. And because of the intervention of some of his friends, they were able to generate $1,000 for William Shatner's horse charity, and William Shatner unblocked Doomcock. It was an incredible story. It was really uplifting, and it was really neat to see it happen. It was really neat to see a feud or perhaps something bad in social media get turned around by people's followers in a quick moment. In a quick moment. They raised $1,000 in less than an hour for William Shatner's horse charity, and William Shatner unbanned Doomcock. How cool is that? Or unblocked him. You want to hear a secret? I'll tell you right now. William Shatner blocked me on Twitter. I have no idea why. We had a cordial relationship. I've directed a movie that he starred in, but he doesn't always run his own social media. So I don't know what happened to be banned. I of course have never said a bad word about William Shatner in my life, but I'm sure somebody didn't even realize who worked on his social media team, or maybe it was because of Axanar. But true story. And it's distressing, but it happened. But that was a good story. What happened with what happened with Doomcock and Shatner? I thought that was great. Mark C says, by the way, I loved The Last Jedi the first time I saw it. It was my girlfriend who said, really, let me tell you what's wrong with this. Look, I agree. I don't necessarily think The Last Jedi is the greatest story in the world. I really don't. I think it has serious issues, serious problems. I really do. And it does. It really does. But, I don't think it has problems because somebody had an agenda that they were forcing into the story. Look, Mon Mothma ran the Rebel fleet in Return of the Jedi. Many Bothans died in order to bring us this information. Or my character, Manny Bothans. Manny Bothans was a guy. We always thought Many and Bothans were a race, but it was really Manny Bothans, as Kevin Rubio will tell you. But yes, so I look, I just think we're living through an evolutionary time of a lot of douchebaggery, and we're gonna have to live through it. And the only thing you can do is sit down and make good work. I think Tango Shalom's a pretty good little independent movie, especially for how much it cost. And it is I definitely think it. I'm practicing what I preach in Tango Shalom. Rich Avina says, so nice to hear some refreshing middle ground, level-headed voices on these issues. I agree we are in a time of great change. I'm hoping things in the film and gaming communities become less heated. Well, Rich, I think they will, because eventually we are going through a tumultuous time of great change. And again, we're always going through tumultuous times of great change. It will shake out, because ultimately, when we're not getting great stories, ultimately people aren't going to make a lot of money, and that's problematic, and that's not a great thing. But I do think that we will eventually get back on track, and ultimately, at the end of the day, we're going to be richer for it as people. We're going to get better stories with more perspectives than we've ever had before, and that's a good thing. It's a good thing. And right now, the old guard, especially, look, as a white middle-class, middle-aged dude, I recognize that most of the time, as I was growing up, the stories of superheroes and Star Trek and all of the things I loved were created by white dudes. They were superheroes, heroic, other than, Dr. Meltoon's Amazonian, but it was all functions. If you had superheroes that were created by marginalized people, and remember, Jerry Siegel and Joel Shuster were immigrant Jews, and they created Superman. And now there's a lot of, as somebody who was raised Jewish, but I don't look Jewish, I've heard a lot of horrible anti-Semitic stuff in my life from people that didn't think I was Jewish. And a lot of it was like nonsensical. I thought it was nonsensical, but look, what I don't understand is we're all coming from a place of, we love this genre material, all of it. And so I would think that as fellow imagination connoisseurs, we would have that as a baseline. We'd have that middle ground. The middle ground where we all love Star Wars and science fiction and comic books and Star Trek and Buffy and Firefly and Doctor Who and whatever else. Look, I think that the mistake that, say, Doctor Who with Jodie Whittaker has made, and I haven't seen a lot of it, is they were not telling great Doctor Who stories because, of course, she was the first female doctor. So they leaned into that fact a little, probably too much. And I think probably it suffered for it, because you don't need to do that. What you need to do is you need to then tell a great story with the fact that how does Doctor Who as a female reincarnated or regenerated into a female, how does that then, what does female energy do to a Time Lord? How does a female Time Lord, like, for instance, I've often said that one of the reasons I liked working with women in the film business is women are inherently pragmatic people. Men, at least one of the differences between men and women is women can be this way too, but men are dreamers and women tend to be more practical. Like a man I told the story about the laser at the beginning of Aliens. Galen Hurd said, that's great that you want this laser for the for the Narcissus at the beginning of Aliens, but Jim, we don't have the money for the budget. If you want to pay for that yourself, fine. Because Gail Ann Hurd's a great producer, and she's like, your every whim, I'm sure, is beautiful and creative, but we don't have the money to pay for them all. And so that made Gail Ann Hurd. She's a great producer. She knows what's up. She knows what's up. And I think, when you have men and women working together in tandem, bringing, why does anybody want to be exactly the same? I mean, it's so weird to me that everybody wants to be, we're all equal. We all want to, we're not the same. Everybody's different, and that's what makes us interesting. And everybody has people have different abilities, and they've got different knowledge bases, and everybody isn't equal. As human beings, as a race of people, we should be equal. But when you're doing a task, if everybody's equal, then I don't know if the task will get done. I want experts in the field. I want people that have been studying their whole lives. Every kid does not deserve a trophy, because at the end of the day, I don't want kids that haven't won trophies on my team. I want the best people I can get. I mean, it's crazy. We all should have a chance. No, we shouldn't all have a chance. We should demand excellence from everybody. We should all work harder. We should do better. We should strive. I mean, that's what the human race is all about. And what we're doing is we're supporting, more than anything, we're supporting mediocrity. And I'm not saying that look, not everybody has the ability to be excellent at everything. They don't. But we have to start asking more of ourselves and demanding more of ourselves. And I agree with inclusion and representation. I agree with all of that. But I also agree in the sovereign individual, the sovereign rights of the individual to maintain their individuality. And what we have to do is start celebrating that, and remember that we as individuals are important and we're meaningful. And we should help people figure out what can they be the most meaningful at doing, rather than screaming at people for trying to be meaningful. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't get it. Stubble McShave. Okay. Stubble McShave, one of the great old members of the 6-month-old Post-Geek Singularity community. Stubble McShave from Sweden. Let me tell you about Stubble. Stubble is more excited about the upcoming Wheel of Time series based on Robert Jordan's books than anybody. I mean, I can't even imagine being as excited about a Star Trek show as Stubble McShave is about the Wheel of Time series. He's written me a letter. I didn't read it to him. I'll read it tomorrow about Wheel of Time, but he sent an email adding more information to it. But Stubble McShave says, Rosamund Pike, swing, I love Rosamund Pike, is now confirmed for the Wheel of Time series by Wheel of Time, at WOT Writers Room. So the Wheel of Time Writers Room, in the role of Morianne, a different take on the mentor magician archetype. Well, Stubble McShave, I want to tell you, son, that I am so happy that you are getting this series, because I don't think, just seeing your letters and seeing how excited you are about this, it just warms my little heart. And bless you, sir, for loving the Wheel of Time as much as you do. Have you read all of the Wheel of Time books? Because I have not. And I need to know more about them. I need to know more of about the Wheel of Time. But anyway, I think I've got to everyone's chat. I've read everyone's letters today, except Stubble McShave's letter about Wheel of Time, because before I went on, I was going to read that letter, but you sent more stuff to Mike Broaden, and I have to collate this data because I would really like to see and read it, because I want to celebrate your Wheel of Time fixation and make it all of our fixations. So we went back in time today we went back 3 days to Robservations chat number 146. I want to thank you for being a part of this chat, part of the Post-Geek Singularity community. I want to thank all of you Imagination Connoisseurs for being here. And remember, this chat was brought to you by Lucky Tiger, for men who want to look good and feel great. And if you go to their website at getluckytiger.com and punch in PGS when you check out, if you buy their great products like their facial scrub and all over body wash, you get 20% off, which is great. I think it's awesome. I want to thank my moderators, Terry, Greg, Detective Jim, and Mike Broaden, for keeping you guys honest and making sure that everybody is polite here in the Post-Geek Singularity community, which I do appreciate. And apparently all of you readers do as well. Please go to my website at Burnettwork.net. And if you want more Willow Yang, check out Willow Talk, because as some of you would love to say, or what's the hashtag? What's the Willow Yang hashtag? I got to find it. I don't know where it is, but it's here. I think Willow Yang should be everywhere all the time. Willow Yang pretty much is everywhere all the time. That's what I think. But you can see Willow Talk. You can also submit your 3-word movie reviews on the website. Please do that. You can become a supporter of the Imagination Connoisseur realm. You can become a supporter of mine. You for $1 a year, $1 a year on the website or more. There's other tiers, but for $1 a year, you're going to get something for becoming an Imagination Connoisseur. And if Mike Bodden would ever send me that cool design, I would put it up on the T-shirt on T Public, and we'd get Imagination Connoisseur. We'd get Post-Geek Singularity shirts because I want one to wear to Comic-Con. So anyway, I want to bring this chat to an end. And remember, every person you meet has a story to tell you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And with that, I'm jumping off the air. Bud Brigman is off the air, just like in the abyss. I'm not Bud Brigman. I'm your host, Robert Meyer Burnett. But I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting the channel. Thank you for being you. And as always, have a better day.